Minister, this is in relation to the postgraduate courses, and I would like to raise the issue again. Though we should also include the graduate entry medical students, as they pay similar high fees. We've now seen huge and justifiable anger amongst postgraduate students because they paid so much for a one-year course, and now they're doing it from their kitchen table or from box rooms. So my question is, what, if any, steps has your department taken in relation to these postgraduate students who have paid up to 18,000 in some cases?
So I'm glad you mentioned medical graduates, because I wouldn't want to miss the Irish Medical Organisation too much in the move from my brief, but I am looking forward to meeting them in the new year on that issue of medical graduate training in Ireland. And I think there's an important conversation we need to have there about how we support medical students in our country, and I look forward to coming back to you on that. At the outset, it's important to note that postgraduate study in the higher education system in Ireland takes place across a very wide and diverse set of disciplines and extends from taught master's programmes to advanced and specialist postgraduate research. So while the introduction of strict public health restrictions impacted widely on postgraduate students, the shift to online learning necessitated by COVID did impact predominantly on taught postgraduate programmes. So I suppose I'm making the point that there are a variety of different types of postgraduate programmes. While Ireland was at level 5, or further in higher education institutions delivered the majority of their classes online with only essential activities on site. As I've said, as we're now at level 3, we're hoping to be more ambitious in terms of the ability to increase face-to-face learning on a phased and incremental basis. It's also hoped to restart a number of social activities, sports, club societies, to allow students again experience some element of college life as well. But we do need to be realistic. Higher education institutions are autonomous, as provided for in legislation, and the determination as to the total level of postgraduate fee to be charged is a matter for each institution in accordance with its own particular operational condition and circumstances. That is a matter of legislation. The actual cost of delivering such a programme is not reduced as a consequence of the pandemic. Indeed, in many ways, they've ran up a range of additional costs in continuing to deliver programmes despite the very unique circumstances, and we've been trying to financially assist them in that regard in meeting those costs, and we've provided a lot of funding for that. I did, though, conscious of the immediate impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on our students, I did ensure that postgraduate students were included in the €50 million financial assistance fund. But I would point out that the variety of postgraduate courses do vary, and therefore the experience this year in college is varying significantly.
Thank you, Minister. The issue here is the fact that institutions have overpromised, and I think your department must take some responsibility for that, just like with the issue of accommodation. Many of the students and parents I have spoken with feel they were misled. We cannot treat universities, ITs and private colleges like primary or post-primary schools. They are marketing very expensive courses. That's what they sold. The students aren't getting what they paid for. In many of all of the cases, they made promises that couldn't be delivered. I understand that COVID-19 adds an element of uncertainty, but many of us back in September could see that overpromising was happening. Students have a right to expect to pay less for a reduced service, Minister. They sold them on the basis of glossy brochures of the experience that they would have. Now, it's not their fault that they weren't able to deliver that, but they should come back and reimburse some of that money at this stage.
I want to thank the Deputy, and I doubt she means it like this, but certainly just in any reference to my department or government, certainly there was no attempt to mislead anybody. I remember getting a letter from the Acting Chief Medical Officer on the Friday, I can't remember the date, but telling us that we needed to bring in additional precautions, which effectively moved a lot of college activity online. That decision was then made and published on that Friday, so the moment we received the public health advice, you've been decent and fair enough to acknowledge that the situation has been very fluid in relation to public health advice. I take the point that you make about the cost of a postgraduate course in Ireland is significant. I have outlined the legislative reality, and it is the laws that these houses have passed in relation to how those fees are set by autonomous institutions. I have outlined the supports that I've put in place along with government colleagues in relation to that, and I would just make the point, and I want to do more in this space too, but we have significantly now increased the level that you can earn and the amount that you can receive from next year as part of the maintenance grant while doing a postgraduate course in Ireland. These are ones that had been decimated in the past recession. We do need to build those supports back up.
Thank you, Minister. The €250 support, I'm sure, brought a much welcome bit of relief to many students, and I welcome the fact that it extended to postgraduates. However, when we consider the huge sums involved in going on and getting a master's, it can be anything from €8,000 to €18,000 a year. And when the move online was announced at the end of September, students should have been offered a chance to defer, to take a refund. Will your department now support students in their calls for a rebate of the fees they have paid? UCD Smurfit Business School students are lobbying for a 30% reduction in their fees, and I know many of British students are as well with some of the colleges there, and I think it's a reasonable demand. GEM students spending $16,000 to study medicine in UCD have actually seen their fees increase this year. So what I'm asking is, will your department engage with these students to find a solution to that? Thank you.
Well, we always engage, but we don't make commitments that I can't stand over. So we will always engage. The legal situation in relation to the autonomy of our universities and the setting of postgraduate fees is a statement of fact. I do always welcome the opportunity to engage and hear views and see how we can support people. I think that's important. We have put in place a number of supports this year for students at undergraduate and postgraduate level. And in fairness to the higher education sector, staff and students, they have kept that system going in, I fully accept, a less than ideal, to put it mildly, scenario where they've continued to provide high quality education, albeit not with the usual college experience. But if you read, as I'm sure you do, the QQI report and the likes, into how the standard of our higher education system has been maintained, despite the additional cost, the additional challenge and the new way of having to provide it. So I do think there's a balance in relation to all of this. This was a situation nobody would have wished to find themselves in. Our higher education institutions have tried to keep the show on the road in that regard, and I hope that 2021 sees us move to higher terrain.